Well, South Africa is marking Youth Day today, 49 years since the June 16 uprising when black students in townships protested against Afrikaans as a medium of instruction. Since then, the country has now become a democracy, and the struggle has become one that more has to do with the economy and finances. When you look at the latest figures from Statistics South Africa, it is black women in particular and women in general who are worst affected by poverty and unemployment in the country. In the coming weeks, there will be a summit held, in fact, in Johannesburg to look at entrepreneurship as a lever out of poverty and destitution. Let's talk now more about this with the author of Awakened and female business icon, Nompumelelo Gobodo, and Charlotte du Plessis, the founder and CEO of Women of Stature, that's the foundation. My thanks to you both for being with us on this Youth Day. If I may start with you, Ms. Gobodo, let's talk about entrepreneurship as being key to economic emancipation, in particular for women in this country.
Very important. If we're looking at financial freedom for women and black people generally, entrepreneurship is the only lever that we have that can actually fast track their economic development. And so we're always worried as a country that we're talking a lot about entrepreneurship, but there's not enough on the ground that actually facilitates this endeavor. So we actually appreciate all the efforts of people like Charlotte who have taken the baton to actually lead in this endeavor, and all the other people in South Africa who are contributing to this endeavor.
And Charlotte, let me come to you then. I mean, the numbers in terms of unemployment and joblessness among women are devastating. And we were listening to Ms. Gobodo speaking about creating, if you will, I'm paraphrasing here, fertile ground for women in particular to take up entrepreneurship. How much of the answer do you think lies in that?
Well, most definitely. I think entrepreneurship is, if I'm not mistaken, one of the leading industries in South Africa. I think entrepreneurship must not be underestimated. It makes up a large percentage of the economy of South Africa. And I think we must encourage entrepreneurship as best as we can. And I think COVID taught us a thing or two. And I think the one thing that it did teach us was that nobody's jobs were secure. And I think that's when entrepreneurship became almost like the leading factor around COVID, because a lot of people were forced into entrepreneurship. And I think very often it is forced upon somebody who doesn't necessarily have the business acumen that they need. And I believe, and I see it on a daily basis, how we as an organization can support women by helping them and upskilling them to understand the basic fundamentals of how to run a business. And I know that Ma'am Nonku shares my passion for women and, the equality of women. And I believe that through an organization such as Woman of Stature, the Woman of Stature Foundation, Ma'am Nonku has seen the work we do. She supports and endorses the work we do. And I believe an organization such as ours is a front runner in terms of preparing women to be able to take their place, rightful place, and help to build the economy of South Africa.
And Charlotte du Plessis, how do you do that in line with what you've defined as basically the 5 pillars of empowerment?
Well, the way that we do it, I think first and foremost is it's all about the me. If you're not ready to step into the world of business, if you're not ready for that emotionally, psychologically, mentally, we need to equip you firstly to do that. So we start with a pillar which we refer to as self-discovery, where we do apply personal mastery. We help them to understand themselves before anything else. How will I stand my place firmly in the world of business? And then, of course, we have to look at the person's general well-being. Mental health is is a huge problem. We know that COVID and many other factors, external factors, can create a tremendous mental health problem. And we have a very high percentage of people who are not able to actually see themselves through a day. So I think mental health issues, then of course financial. Financial is a huge factor, because if you don't know how to manage your household budget, how on earth are you going to manage a business? So we do talk around that. We teach people how to budget. We teach them how to understand the financial implications of going into debt when you are going to start a business. And we strongly advise them against that. And then, of course, leadership and entrepreneurship.
Right, and I want to come back to you, Mam Nonkululeko Koboto, because you've had your fair share of endeavors as an entrepreneur, right, for many decades now, and you came into it, fortunately. Charlotte was talking about the struggle to balance the books, etc., but you came into this with a head for numbers, but it wasn't always smooth sailing. So is entrepreneurship something that we can all do?
Yes, I suppose, when you are skilled and you understand a certain sector, you stand a better chance of making a success of it. I also started, as a chartered accountant working in the field. And when I stepped out to open my own practice, I had the confidence that I knew chartered accountancy, I knew auditing, so I stood a better chance. But entrepreneurship is actually, it's not an easy thing to get into, because there are all these obstacles that face you. How are you going to crack the market? Funding is always a big issue that we hear about all the time in terms of, access to funding. And again, I mean, the market is always dominated by those who were there before you, who have built big businesses, and now you have to compete with them. And how do you actually compete with them? This is something that we're determined that we will not be satisfied by being on the sidelines of our own economy. And it was a big fight for us to make it as far as we did.
And just on that point, still with you, Nonkululeko Koboto, you came into entrepreneurship as someone who had a qualification from a tertiary level. And when you look at the unemployment figures, there is a link even in terms of someone with a degree, a diploma's ability to find work versus anyone with just a matric or a qualification lower than that. In fact, when you look at the figures from Stats SA, joblessness among graduates was at 11.7% at the last count, compared to 34.9% for people with only a matric and 39% for people with less than a matric. So a formal education is beneficial, Ms. Koboto.
Definitely. It actually saddens me that our education system doesn't prepare people for entrepreneurship, because you are told, get a qualification, get a degree, get a job. And so when people are qualified, they have the degree and they can't get a job, they don't know what to do, because the system itself is not equipping people for entrepreneurship. So this is something that we need to take back to the universities, back to schools, so that the thinking of people actually changes towards entrepreneurship. If you look at all the world economies, they were developed by entrepreneurs, people who came up with brilliant business ideas, innovation, and change the world. So in South Africa now, we need to change the mindset around just getting a job to how do you create jobs yourself? How do you use your own gifts to create jobs?
So Charlotte du Plessis, yes, you've got events where you're encouraging women to go into entrepreneurship. How, though, broadly, do you stand in that gap, have to bridge that gap, right, between what one attains through a formal education and ultimately the level of agility and even fluidity that the entrepreneurship space requires of a business person?
Well, as Nonku alluded to, entrepreneurship is not easy. So we're not trying to paint a pretty picture here and make it out to be a very easy thing to do, that you can hop out of one job and become your own boss. It's not as easy as that at all. You do need a lot of skills. You need to have a very clear understanding of what the risks are. And I think the risk factors, sometimes we tend to shy away from it. But I think the way that we want to address entrepreneurship is to teach people how to do the basics. And from the basics, then through a network like we have in a community, like with Nonku, myself, and other women who are experienced, is to actually guide you through mentorship programs, through coaching, through skills development, and then teach you how to run a set of books as an entrepreneur. Because if you don't know how to do that, doesn't matter how good you are with your hands, doesn't matter how the product might look or seem to you or the passion you have, it's going to be very, very difficult to run a business. So I think the general consensus is get into a community where people can help and teach you the skills and, just generally speaking, be a support system for you.
Are there enough of those support systems, Ms. du Plessis?
I don't believe that there are. But then again, it might also be that we don't know about them. And I think that's where Women of Stature and myself and Nonku want to stand up and be front and center and say there are such organizations such as ours. We are there to support the women. And yes, about, equality, bringing equality and balance into anything you do is not only about the woman. There are so many men that are sitting without jobs, so many men that are, as you alluded to earlier on, they're graduates and they can't find jobs. It's not about just the woman, because, we must say as a generalization, we should look at all people and help all people. But we as an organization, we've chosen to be focused on women. And I believe, as long as we can help one woman, we're helping a family.
And Ms. Kobato, I want to end with you then, as someone, again, who's walked the journey for many years. What is the difference, the benefit for or from gathering with like-minded women when anyone in business or the corporate space is every day almost bombarded basically with different fora, conferences, summits, high tea events where you're allowed or able to mix with people from across industries? Why is a women-orientated space so different and so important in that context?
I mean, the road towards entrepreneurship is a very lonely one. So you can imagine when you're starting a business on your own, you don't have the kind of support that a leader in corporate has. You have to be the marketing manager, the bookkeeper, the HR director, the CEO, and all of those things. So when women come together, first of all, they network. Networking is actually key in business, and doors are opened during that networking session. And lastly, just hearing from other women how they are overcoming all those challenges that you're also facing in business. You come out encouraged, believing that you can also make it if people went through the same problems and they made it.
Nonguleko Koboto, Charlotte du Plessis, thank you both for your time on the SABC this evening.